James Reed, at 35 years old, stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his executive office on the 45th floor, surveying the San Francisco skyline as if it were his personal domain. At 6'2", with an athletic build, he exuded the controlled confidence of a man who always got what he wanted. His dark brown hair was styled with meticulous precision, and his slate-gray eyes revealed little emotion. The sleek reflection on the glass hinted at his immaculate, custom-tailored suit, a subtle nod to a life of discipline and power. Inside Reed Innovations, no detail was left to chance. James believed that efficiency was everything, and that included running his technology empire with a ruthless edge. Late mornings were spent finalizing data-driven decisions. Early afternoons were devoted to managing teams at a pace few could match. The decor of his office matched his personality. Black leather chairs, steel accents, and glass walls that kept everyone in sight yet at a careful distance. His assistant, Monica Reynolds, 42, blonde hair pinned in a tight bun, and standing at 5'5", entered quietly, carrying a digital tablet loaded with schedules and reports. She had served him faithfully for 10 years, one of the few individuals he trusted in this world. Monica was the only person who dared to question his decisions, and she often did so in a calm but firm manner. This morning, James was reviewing the performance metrics of an executive named Peter Harlan. With the single tap of his finger, he highlighted a string of failed projects that had cost the company valuable time and money. Monica stood by his side, scanning his face for some hint of leniency, but she found none. In a brisk, clinical tone, James summoned Peter into the glass-walled conference room adjacent to his office. Everyone in that room felt the tension. James's tall frame cast a long shadow under the fluorescent lights, emphasizing the stark difference between his unyielding composure and Peter's nervous slouch. Coolly, James went through every missed benchmark, every poorly handled negotiation, and every lost opportunity. Then, just as dispassionately, he concluded the meeting. Peter would be let go by the end of the day. No raised voice, no personal attacks, just swift and final. It was a clean cut, like a surgeon's scalpel. Monica escorted the stunned executive out, then returned to James's office, her shoulders tense. "You made your decision in record time," she observed, placing the tablet on his sleek black desk. "It had to be done," James responded curtly, glancing at the digital clock on his computer screen. He never allowed himself a moment's hesitation once his data pointed to a clear course of action. Monica inhaled, steeling her courage. "The board wants you to soften your image," she began delicately. "They think a more personable CEO might boost our public perception." James narrowed his eyes. "You know I have no interest in staged publicity," he replied. The memory of a past relationship, one that had ended when his girlfriend attempted to scam him for money, flickered through his mind. It reminded him that vulnerability was dangerous, especially when people knew the weight his name carried. His cell phone vibrated on the desk, the caller ID flashing "Mom." He hesitated for a second, then pressed the button to send it to voicemail. The mere sight of her name stirred a swirl of conflicting emotions, guilt, duty, and an ache he couldn't define. Family ties remained distant, yet they pulled at him in quiet moments he preferred to ignore. Monica noticed, but said nothing. Instead, she tried once more to approach him about an upcoming arranged meeting with the daughter of an important investor, some well-meaning attempt at showing James as a more relatable, family-oriented man. Mentioning it, she saw the flicker of annoyance in his steely gaze. He rose from his chair, adjusting his cuffs. "End of discussion," he said flatly. Just then, his desk phone rang. The deep hum of the ringer felt ominous in the silent office. Monica answered, then handed the receiver to James with concern. He listened for a moment, jaw tightening. A crucial contract was in jeopardy, and he would have to handle it personally. Tonight. Without a word, James grabbed his suit jacket and strode toward the elevator, his expression unreadable. Yet a faint tension clung to him, as if the tightly wound threads of his life might soon start to unravel. That evening, James sat behind his desk, catching his breath after a last-minute salvage of the threatened contract. The city lights twinkled through the glass walls, revealing a rare stillness in his posture. He rubbed his temples, recalling how close he'd come to losing a multi-million-dollar deal. Control was everything to him, and the near miss felt like a personal affront. Monica stepped into the office, carefully balancing 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up," she said softly, placing 1 cup on his desk. He accepted it with a curt nod. "Thanks," he murmured, taking a sip. The taste was strong and bitter, just like his mood. Monica hesitated, then ventured the topic she knew he avoided. "James, the board has been on my case. They want to see a different side of you, a gentler side. They believe the company's stock could suffer if you keep refusing these arranged events." He set his coffee down with a sharp click. "I'm not interested in parading around with some stranger just to appease public relations," he declared. His mind drifted to the last relationship he had taken a chance on. Vanessa Mooring, a 32-year-old model whose beauty was as striking as her ambitions. What had begun as an exciting, high-society romance ended in betrayal when he discovered she was siphoning money for personal investments under his name. That memory still singed his pride, reinforcing his decision to remain emotionally guarded. Monica squared her shoulders. "It's not just about an image, James. I think you need someone to help you find balance. This life you lead, firing people at the drop of a hat, burying yourself in data sheets, it's all business, zero heart." His jaw tightened. "Heart, Monica, you know what happened the last time I tried that. My heart nearly cost me a fortune." She exhaled, knowing his stubbornness well. "All right, let's at least confirm or cancel any future dinners I set up in advance. One of them is tomorrow night, a casual meeting with Melissa, daughter of Harold Anderson, our key investor." James's expression darkened. "Cancel it," he said without hesitation. "Done," Monica said with a faint sigh. In truth, she felt torn. On the one hand, she understood James's reluctance, shaped by a string of personal and professional disappointments. On the other, she worried that his isolation was eroding what remained of his empathy. While they spoke, an email notification popped up on James's screen. It was from Richard Blackwell, the 58-year-old director of marketing. The subject line read, "Urgent meeting, public image concerns." James clicked it open, scanning the contents. Blackwell was echoing the board's sentiment. James's merciless style was hurting their brand, and if he didn't change, the consequences could be dire. He inhaled sharply. "Monica, schedule a meeting with Richard for first thing tomorrow." He needed to put out yet another fire, this time aimed directly at his personal approach. She nodded, then gently touched the top of his desk. "We could try a different angle. There's a charity event in 2 months. Maybe you can attend and show some humanity, genuinely, not just for PR. People notice when you make an effort." He turned away from her, staring through the window at the shimmering bay. For a moment, he was lost in memories. Vanessa's deceitful smile, the paternal pressure that had molded him into a no-nonsense businessman. He felt the gnawing emptiness that came with having everything yet trusting no one. Finally, he turned back to Monica. "We'll see. I have to fix this contract fiasco first." Monica straightened her shoulders. "Sure. But there's something else," she said, summoning her courage. "The design team is short a lead, The last one resigned last week, and I've been trying to schedule interviews. We need fresh talent soon, someone who can revamp our new app in time for the next product cycle. James waved a dismissive hand. Then do it. Just don't involve me in petty hires. I have bigger fires to put out. She nodded, stepping toward the door. In the hall's dim lighting, she cast one last, worried glance at him. He was already immersed in spreadsheets, as though no conversation about his personal life had even occurred. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm was rolling in, matching the unsettled tension that seemed to hang over James's every decision. Late the next afternoon, James maneuvered his sleek Porsche through a torrent of rain. Thick clouds had descended upon San Francisco, draping the city in a downpour so heavy that headlights bounced off glistening asphalt. Inside the car, muffled jazz played through high-end speakers, but it did little to ease his restlessness. He had just finished a tense meeting at a high-end restaurant with a long-time client, Gerald Thompson, who was anything but pleased with James's cold approach to negotiation. Thompson, 61, barrel-chested with a neatly trimmed grey beard, had once been a loyal collaborator, but lately, even he found James's unyielding style grating. The contract they were supposed to renew had become a battlefield of terms and penalties, leaving Thompson visibly frustrated. As James left the restaurant's valet, he replayed the dinner in his mind. His tactics had nearly cost him a key ally. Yes, he'd secured the deal, but the air hung heavy with lingering resentment. "Am I pushing too hard?" he muttered to himself, though he quickly brushed off the thought. Results were what mattered. Wipers squeaked furiously across the windshield, clearing thick sheets of rain. As he navigated through congested streets, his phone buzzed again, his mother, Elizabeth Reed, calling. He briefly glanced at the screen, then ignored it, letting the ring fall silent. Their relationship had become a pattern of polite distance ever since his father's passing. Emotional phone calls only stirred a mixture of guilt and resentment he preferred not to confront. At a red light, James caught sight of a couple huddled under a shared umbrella on the sidewalk. They seemed to cling to each other for warmth, braving the storm with quiet affection. A flicker of something unfamiliar tugged at him. Loneliness, perhaps. He tamped it down. Attachments, in his experience, led to vulnerability, and he had no room for that. He accelerated as the light turned green, the Porsche's engine responding with smooth power. Rain hammered the hood, creating a rhythmic percussion that matched his simmering mood. The city's neon signs blurred into color-streaked smears across the windows, an oddly beautiful chaos. James realized he was heading toward a less familiar route. Forced by road closures and flash flood warnings, lightning cracked overhead. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. The phone beeped once more, this time a text message from Monica, reminding him of an early morning meeting. He sighed, thinking of how hard she worked to keep everything balanced. Despite her disapproval of his personal detachment, she was a stalwart ally. Suddenly, thunder reverberated, and a branch from a waterlogged tree crashed onto the street ahead. He swerved to avoid it, heart pounding. "Damn storm," he muttered, fists clenched around the wheel. Gradually, he became aware of an ache in his chest, not physical pain, but the weight of unaddressed doubts. His mind replayed the confrontation with Gerald Thompson. Was his unwavering approach really serving him well, or was it isolating him further? He glanced again at the phone on the console, pondering whether he should finally answer his mother's call. He shook his head. Dealing with family was a complication best shelved for another time. Winding through narrower, darker streets, he spotted dilapidated storefronts and old residential buildings. This part of town wasn't on his typical route, but he pressed on, determined to get home. The GPS on his dashboard recalculated, guiding him toward a modest thoroughfare. Another flash of lightning lit up the road, revealing the silhouette of a figure stepping off the curb. The headlights illuminated a young woman, drenched by the downpour, clutching a worn backpack. She stepped unexpectedly into his path. His heart lurched. Instinct kicked in, and he slammed on the brakes. Tires squealed against wet pavement. Adrenaline coursed through him as the car lurched to a halt mere inches from her. For an instant, time seemed suspended. The woman's startled eyes met his, wide with shock, in the glare of the Porsche's headlights. The storm roared on, and James realized with a sudden jolt that his carefully controlled world was about to change in ways he couldn't yet fathom. The rain hammered James's Porsche like a relentless drumbeat as he fumbled to unbuckle his seatbelt. Heart pounding, he threw open the car door and stepped into the deluge. The street was deserted except for flickering streetlights and overflowing storm drains. His shoes splashed in a puddle, soaking his expensive Italian leather. Ahead, the young woman he'd nearly hit stood frozen, her eyes reflecting both fear and defiance. She appeared to be in her late 20s, about 5'6", with rain-soaked light brown hair plastered to her face. There was an unmistakable dignity in the way she held herself, despite being drenched to the bone. He noticed the faint quiver of her lips as cold wind swept through the block. "You all right?" James called out over the roar of rain. Taking a step closer, his suit clung uncomfortably to his skin, water trickling down his collar. She nodded stiffly but didn't speak at first. Her gaze darted to the pristine Porsche, then back to James. "Yeah, sorry," she finally replied, voice tight. "I wasn't looking at the street." He exhaled, forcing composure. "No harm done," he said, though his pulse still hammered. Normally, he would have scolded someone for stepping into traffic, but her expression, some mix of shame and pride, stopped him. She hugged her backpack protectively, the rain splashing off its tattered exterior. "I'll just go," she murmured. James hesitated, glancing around. The neighborhood was clearly run down, the kind of place he rarely ventured into. Something about her posture, how she seemed determined not to appear weak, nagged at him. "Do you have somewhere dry to stay?" he asked, not entirely sure why. She pressed her lips together. "I'm fine," she said, though her teeth chattered slightly. "Look, I nearly ran you over. Let me at least give you a ride." He gestured to his car. Part of him wondered if this was a terrible idea. Trust wasn't his strong suit. Yet leaving her alone felt wrong. For a moment, she stood rooted on the sidewalk, water streaming down her face. Then she took a shaky breath and nodded. "I guess that might be safer than walking," she admitted, though her eyes flickered with caution. They hurried back to the Porsche. James cringed at the rivulets of water soaking his luxurious leather seats, but he said nothing. Her backpack dripped onto the floor as she settled in, her posture stiff. He reached over to turn up the heat, ignoring the fact that his own tailored jacket was nearly ruined. "Thank you," she said quietly, glancing at him from the passenger seat. "My name's Linda, by the way, Linda Harper." He noted the clarity in her voice despite her shaky exterior. "James Reed," he replied. Normally, he didn't offer more than his name, but the moment felt oddly intimate under the circumstances. At that, her eyes flickered with recognition. James Reed, the CEO of Reed Innovations. She gave a soft, incredulous laugh, then shook her head. "I've heard of your company. You're sort of well-known." He cleared his throat. "That's me." He turned his attention to the road, guiding the car carefully around a corner. In a city as large as San Francisco, it was no surprise his name carried weight. Usually, it was an advantage. Occasionally, it was a burden. Linda let out a shuddering breath, holding her backpack tight. "Thanks again," she repeated, voice softened by fatigue. "I just need to find a place to wait out the rain." James glanced her way, torn between curiosity and his typical urge to maintain distance. She looked exhausted, yet there was something bright in her green eyes, a stubborn resilience. "I can drop you anywhere you want," he said at last. She hesitated. "There's a shelter downtown, but they might be full. I'm a bit late." He swallowed the lump in his throat. This woman was homeless, and he was a billionaire. The gulf between them felt massive, yet here they were, side by side in a storm. "If it's okay with you," he offered, "we could stop somewhere for a hot drink, at least until the worst of this rain passes." She blinked, clearly startled by the kindness. Part of him was surprised too, but the storm showed no sign of letting up, and he couldn't fathom dropping her off in this deluge. After a moment's silence, Linda nodded. "Sure." But just for a bit. He managed a tight, polite smile as he signaled the car into a side street. His heart thudded with a strange mixture of apprehension and something unexpected, maybe empathy. Outside, the downpour began to lighten, as though momentarily granting them a fragile truce. Within the car, the air was thick with tension and intrigue. James realized he was stepping beyond his carefully managed comfort zone, and that knowledge both excited and unnerved him. Half an hour later, they sat in a fluorescent-lit diner on the outskirts of downtown. It was open 24 hours, the kind of place with vinyl booths and laminated menus that boasted everything from waffles to chili. Rain pelted the windows, though not as fiercely now. James shrugged off his drenched suit jacket, laying it across the seat beside him. Across the small table, Linda clutched a mug of hot coffee, her shaky fingers wrapped around the cup for warmth. "You sure you're all right?" he asked, noting the faint tremble in her shoulders. She gave a small smile. "I'm better than I was half an hour ago." "This coffee helps?" A waitress named Rose, she looked to be in her mid-50s, with strands of grey in her neatly tied hair, approached with a friendly nod. "Anything else I can get for you two?" "We've got fresh pie." James started to shake his head, but paused at the sight of Linda's hesitant glance toward the rotating display of pastries. "We'll take a slice of apple pie and a slice of pecan," he decided, handing the menus back. Rose left with a knowing smile. "You didn't have to do that," Linda murmured, tucking a lock of damp hair behind her ear. "I can pay for my own food." "I'm aware," he replied simply. "Consider it an apology for nearly hitting you in the street." She lowered her gaze. "I wasn't paying attention," she admitted, stirring her coffee. "I'd just lost track of time and, well, I don't have a stable place right now, moving from shelter to shelter. Sometimes you get lost in your thoughts." James tried to picture her life, moving from one uncertain situation to another. It was jarringly different from his existence of immaculate order and control. "Are you, from around here?" he asked carefully, not wanting to pry too much. "I moved to San Francisco about 2 years ago," Linda explained, pausing as Rose returned with 2 generous slices of pie. She took a grateful bite, letting the warmth settle in her. "I'm originally from a small town in Oregon, came here for work, graphic design gigs, mostly freelance." At that, he perked up. "Graphic design." She nodded, her eyes brightening slightly. "I studied design in college, did a lot of branding projects, even some UI work for apps. But it's been rough since my apartment burned down 6 months ago. I lost everything. Portfolio, laptop, all my savings." Her voice quavered, and she quickly composed herself. "It's not exactly easy to land new clients when you're trying to rebuild from scratch." James listened in silence, recalling that earlier conversation with Monica about needing a designer. The coincidence was almost uncanny, but he couldn't just impulsively hire someone he'd met under these circumstances. Or could he? He pushed that thought aside for the moment. He noticed how Linda ate her pie, carefully, savoring each forkful as though it were a rare treat. Without meaning to, he found himself admiring her composed dignity. She might have been wearing soggy clothes and carrying her life in a backpack, but there was a quiet resolve in her eyes that reminded him of steel. "Sorry," she said, glancing self-consciously at him. "I'm not used to being around people who drive cars worth more than most houses." James offered a guarded smile. "I suppose that's fair. My life has its own complications, though." "It's not just fancy suits and high-end cars." She took another bite of pie, still hesitant. "I've heard about your company. Reed Innovations. Big on cutting-edge tech, from software to hardware. You have a reputation for being tough." He let out a half-chuckle. "I guess that's the nice way to put it," he admitted. "Look, Linda, I'm not sure why I asked you here. Normally, I'd have just called a cab for someone in your situation. But," he paused, unsure how to articulate the strange pull he felt. Rose passed by and refilled their coffees, shooting them a curious glance before tending to another table. The diner was mostly empty, the overhead fluorescents buzzing faintly. Outside, the rain had tapered to a slow drizzle, leaving the streets glossy. Linda set down her fork, her green eyes meeting his grey ones directly. "Whatever the reason, thank you for this meal, and for letting me get warm." He nodded, then hesitated. An unexpected idea began to form. "You mentioned you do UI and branding. My company has a project right now, a new app. We're down a lead designer." Her brows lifted, but her skepticism was evident. "Are you offering me a job?" James raised a hand. "I'm just saying, I need a designer and you need an opportunity. It wouldn't be charity. I pay for results. If you're good, it might work out." She stared at him for a long moment, suspicion warring with hope. Finally, she exhaled, shaking her head. "I don't want anyone's pity." He leaned forward, quiet intensity in his gaze. "Neither do I. Think about it. 2 weeks. Freelance contract. If it's not a good fit, no harm done." Linda's lips parted as though to refuse again, but she paused. This time, a glint of possibility lit her eyes. "Let me think about it," she whispered. James nodded, fully aware that he had just crossed a line he'd always maintained, mixing personal compassion with professional dealings. Yet, in that moment, it didn't feel like a mistake. Instead, it felt unsettlingly right. And so they sat there in the late-night diner, two strangers on opposite ends of life's spectrum, brought together by a rainstorm and an almost accident. Both silently wondered what new twists might unfold in the days to come, neither aware of just how much their worlds would collide. By the time dawn broke, the rain had lessened to a faint drizzle, and the Blue Moon diner was nearly empty. James Reed sat across from Linda Harper, each of them cradling a final cup of coffee. The events of the long, stormy night felt surreal to them both. One of the wealthiest CEOs in San Francisco offering a potential freelance contract to a woman who had nowhere safe to sleep. Yet, here they were, reluctantly drawn together by equal parts circumstance and curiosity. Linda glanced at the laminated diner menu one last time. She didn't appear hungry anymore, just exhausted. Her eyes were bloodshot from lack of rest, and the damp strands of her light brown hair clung to her cheeks. James noticed her hesitation as she stared down at the cup in her hands, as if steeling herself for a decision that could reshape her life. "So," James began, breaking the silence, "have you decided on the offer? It's not charity. You'd be paid for your work." "We need a designer on a critical project," Linda sighed, then brushed an errant strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't want a free handout," she said quietly. "If you want my design skills, you'll have to let me do it on my own terms. I can show you my portfolio. Well, what's left of it, anyway. Most of my old work got destroyed." James set his coffee down, curious. "You have samples saved online, right?" You mentioned some of your work is in the cloud. She nodded. I do. I'll show you later. If you still think I'm worth hiring, we can talk about this 2-week test run. Deal, James said, his tone decisive. Sensing relief in the air, Rose, the 56-year-old waitress who had been hovering discreetly, approached. You two look like you've had a long night. I'm glad you found each other under the circumstances. She offered Linda a warm smile. This city can be tough. Sometimes you need a break. Linda returned a small but genuine smile. Thanks, Rose. You've been really kind. James checked his watch. He needed to be at the office soon. The weight of a busy schedule loomed over him, but for once it didn't feel all-consuming. He reached into his wallet and paid the bill, leaving a generous tip. Then he stood, shrugging on his damp blazer. Ready? Outside, the air was crisp from the fading storm. The early morning sunlight broke through scattered clouds, illuminating puddles on the pavement. James guided Linda to a modest hotel a few blocks away, noticing how she tensed at the idea of him paying for her room. This isn't permanent, he assured her, pulling the car to a stop, but you need a place to clean up and regroup. I don't expect you to start designing while you're freezing and exhausted. She met his gaze, eyes conflicted. Fine. But just 1 or 2 nights until I get my first paycheck from you. After that, I'll handle it on my own. Understood, James replied, inwardly respecting her insistence on maintaining dignity. Before Linda stepped out, she paused, clutching her worn backpack. I want you to know I really can do the job. I'm not looking for pity. I believe you, he said. In truth, he wasn't entirely sure why he believed her. Maybe it was the candid honesty in her voice. But something about Linda's quiet resolve had broken through his usual defenses. She gave him a small nod, then disappeared into the hotel lobby. For a moment, James lingered in the Porsche, staring after her. This chance encounter had already disrupted his carefully managed life. As he pulled away from the curb, he tried to rationalize it. The company needed a designer. She needed a break. This was simply a business arrangement, nothing more. Yet the subtle tug in his chest told him otherwise. He shook off the feeling and merged into traffic, heading toward Reed Innovations. Still, he couldn't help a faint curiosity about what might happen next, now that Linda was stepping, albeit cautiously, into his world. Linda Harper's first day at Reed Innovations started with an uneasy flutter in her stomach. She had managed to secure a couple of clean outfits, thanks to the modest hotel that offered a laundry facility. Her reflection in the mirror revealed someone determined to appear professional. Hair pulled back, a freshly pressed blouse, and slacks that fit decently. She took a shaky breath, reminding herself that this opportunity had to be real, not just a fleeting moment of kindness from a billionaire CEO. The lobby of Reed Innovations gleamed with polished marble floors and towering glass walls. Linda approached the reception desk, clutching the temporary ID badge Monica Reynolds had arranged. "Good morning," she said softly, feeling her heartbeat quicken when the security guard scanned her credentials. On the elevator ride to the design department, Linda's mind buzzed with both excitement and apprehension. She recalled her last stable job in a mid-sized firm, so drastically different from this colossal powerhouse. The moment she stepped out, she was greeted by the hum of creativity, sketches pinned to translucent boards, digital screens displaying user interface mock-ups, and a handful of designers hunched over tablets. Kevin Winters, the 41-year-old director of design, approached her with a cautious look. He was bald with stylish glasses, his posture exuding a blend of confidence and skepticism. "You must be Linda," he said, extending a hand. "James mentioned you'd be joining us." Linda nodded, meeting his handshake with firm resolve. "That's right. I'm here to contribute to the new app's interface. I know it's short notice, but I'm ready to get started." Kevin led her to a long conference table where a handful of team members sat. Sophia Kim, a junior designer of 29 due, flashed Linda a friendly smile. Her short black hair accented with a purple streak along one side. "Welcome aboard," Sophia said, sliding a chair out for Linda. For the next hour, Linda listened intently as Kevin outlined the app's objectives. Their product was focused on a cutting-edge communication platform with integrated artificial intelligence, something poised to revolutionize real-time collaboration for businesses. Linda scribbled notes, asked questions, and gradually felt the tension in her shoulders ease. Despite her personal challenges, design was the one area where she felt fully at home. A few curious glances darted her way. The rumor mill likely churned at the notion of James Reed personally bringing in a new designer, especially one nobody had heard of. Linda expected that. She answered inquiries professionally, keeping her personal story locked away. Once the meeting concluded, Kevin showed her a temporary workspace. It was a minimalist desk tucked near the windows, offering a sweeping view of downtown San Francisco. "We run a tight ship here," Kevin said, crossing his arms. "I'll be honest, I'm not sure why James picked you, but if you can deliver, great. Our timelines are intense, and we don't hold hands." Linda raised her chin. "I wouldn't want it any other way." She spent the next few hours familiarizing herself with the company's design tools, occasionally exchanging ideas with Sophia, who seemed genuinely supportive. By midday, Linda had produced a few initial sketches that sparked interest among the team. Even Kevin gave a grudging nod of approval. Later, Monica appeared, summoning Linda to James's private office. Walking into that space made Linda's pulse quicken. The immaculate glass and steel aesthetic and the panoramic city view were imposing. James stood by his desk, checking something on his phone. He cast Linda a brief, unreadable glance before speaking in a measured tone. "How's your first day?" Linda clasped her hands together. "Productive. I'm catching up on the app's requirements." Monica lingered near the doorway, her expression protective. "James, we should discuss," she began, but he raised a hand, signaling for privacy. Monica left, though Linda noticed a hint of tension in her posture. James's gaze softened, ever so slightly. "Good. Let me know if you need resources. This project is a priority." He paused, studying her intently. "I trust you're settling in?" "Yes." "Thank you," Linda replied. Though nerves fluttered within her, she felt a surge of determination. Here, skill mattered. She could prove herself and repay this chance he'd given her. James nodded curtly, dismissing her. On her way out, she caught a glimpse of Monica's worried expression down the hall. Something about it stirred a nagging sense that not everyone welcomed Linda's sudden arrival. Still, as she returned to her desk, she reminded herself she wasn't here to make friends. She was here to design and to survive. As night fell on her first official workday, Linda returned to the small budget hotel she currently called home. The neon sign outside flickered intermittently, and the worn carpet in the hallway smelled faintly of stale coffee. But it was warm, relatively safe, and for now, hers. She dropped her worn backpack on the bed and removed her neatly folded blouse, taking a moment to reflect on the day's whirlwind. She had impressed the design team by proposing a streamlined user experience for the new app. Kevin's skepticism had softened slightly, and Sophia had asked Linda to join her for lunch the next day. The small victories felt good, yet reality hit hard when she stepped into her cramped, single room with peeling wallpaper and a lone overhead bulb. The contrast between Reed Innovations' glossy offices and her own precarious situation weighed on her. While rummaging through her bag for a snack, Linda realized she hadn't eaten a proper meal since midday. Saving money was critical. Every dollar counted if she wanted to escape this transient life. She popped open a packet of crackers, calling it dinner. A pang of hunger coiled in her stomach, but she tried to ignore it. Late that evening, her phone vibrated with an incoming text. She picked it up, eyes widening at the sender, James Reed. It read, "We have progress review tomorrow at 9 a.m. Also, I'd like to discuss some designs with you over dinner. Let me know if you're free." She blinked, uncertain how to respond. Dinner? His invitation triggered mixed feelings of gratitude and wariness. He'd already done so much. Was this going to be a purely professional meal, or something more? Still, she couldn't deny how much she valued a chance to talk shop with the company's CEO about her ideas. Eventually, she tapped a quick reply. Sure, dinner works. She fell back onto the bed, exhaustion flooding her. Her mind wandered to the apartment she'd lost in a devastating fire. In quieter moments like this, she remembered the smoke, the helpless feeling as flames consumed her belongings, artwork, equipment, documents, even personal mementos. That traumatic event had left her with little but the clothes on her back and whatever was stored online. Nowadays, each day felt like a slow climb from the ashes. Early the next morning, Linda took a bus to a nearby government office to see if there was any update on her lost IDs. It was an endless maze of paperwork and bureaucracy, each form reminding her of what she'd lost. "It'll take a few more weeks," the tired clerk told her. Disappointed but unsurprised, Linda hurried back across town to make her 9 a.m. meeting. In the sleek conference room at Reed Innovations, her mood lifted when she saw the slides Kevin and Sophia had prepared, showcasing her initial concepts. She felt a hint of pride, seeing her designs displayed on the massive wall screen. James entered lately, his presence instantly commanding attention. He nodded at Linda in acknowledgement and then took a seat at the head of the table. Amid discussions of color palettes, button placements and user flows, Linda caught James watching her with an intense curiosity. She tried to ignore the slight flutter in her chest, reminding herself that she was only here on a 2-week contract. This wasn't about romance or pity, just business. After the meeting, James pulled her aside. "Dinner tonight, remember? I'll have my driver pick you up. We'll go somewhere quiet to talk about the app." She hesitated, then mustered a smile. "All right. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss it in detail." Later that day, while fine-tuning a prototype on her workstation, Linda noticed Monica entering with a stack of files. The assistant paused, her gaze lingering on Linda. "James wants this project perfected. No mistakes," she said in a clipped tone. Linda offered a polite nod. "Understood." Monica pursed her lips, then softened slightly. "You've made a strong impression on the design team. Keep it up." She placed the files on Linda's desk and left. That night, as Linda prepared for the work dinner, she realized she was looking forward to an actual meal. Her stomach growled in anticipation. She'd been skipping dinner too often lately, her savings a higher priority than daily nourishment. Part of her resented James's wealth, the ease with which he could solve problems. Yet another part of her felt grateful for the odd sense of respect she was beginning to glimpse behind his cool facade. James Reed chose an upscale French restaurant for their work dinner, but he noticed Linda's apprehension the moment they stepped inside. The warm glow of candlelight and hushed conversations contrasted sharply with her modest outfit. She looked around, swallowing hard, and he realized the setting might be overwhelming. "It's a bit formal," he admitted, as the maitre d' led them to a private corner table. "Next time, I'll find someplace more relaxed. I thought you might appreciate good food." Linda glanced at the menu, eyes widening at the prices. "I appreciate it," she said carefully, "but maybe something simpler would have been fine." He managed a thin smile, ordering a glass of red wine for himself and water for Linda when she insisted on not drinking. Once they were alone, Conversation flowed naturally toward the design project. She pulled out her tablet and showed him a mock-up for the new user interface. He asked pointed questions about the color scheme, user experience, and how quickly her proposed design could be integrated with the existing code base. Gradually, though, the talk turned more personal. James mentioned that he'd once considered studying fine art at a prestigious university before his father pressured him into business school. The confession seemed to surprise him as much as Linda. He rarely disclosed those details. She tilted her head. Why not pursue both? You clearly appreciate aesthetics. Your art collection at home must be impressive. A shadow passed over his features. I do have a collection, but I've not painted or drawn in years. My father used to say there was no profit in paintbrushes. He gave a dry laugh. I guess I believed him. Linda nodded, stirring her water with a straw. I get it. My mom was supportive, but I had plenty of people telling me art wouldn't pay the bills. She looked around at the restaurant's opulent decor. But you found success anyway. James shrugged, at the cost of shutting out a lot of things. She was about to respond when her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it, frowning. It was a news alert referencing an old scandal involving James's ex-girlfriend, Vanessa Mooring. Linda recognized the woman's name from an article she'd stumbled upon. The piece detailed how Vanessa had tried to siphon money from James using fake investment accounts. Sensing Linda's reaction, James sighed. It's nothing new. The tabloids occasionally dredge up my personal history, he said quietly. She was the last person I let my guard down with, and it nearly destroyed me financially, not to mention the humiliation. Linda hesitated. I'm sorry you went through that. He studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. That's why I don't trust easily, especially when it comes to relationships. But with you... He paused, looking almost apologetic. I don't know. Something about our first meeting. She felt her cheeks warm. You didn't have to help me that night, but you did. He let out a small chuckle. I keep telling myself it's just business, or maybe it's some new PR angle. But it doesn't feel like that at all. The tension between them simmered, filled with unspoken questions neither seemed ready to answer. James, noticing Linda's half-finished plate, gently prompted her to eat more. She obliged, though the conversation weighed on her. After dinner, they stepped outside into the cool night air. This time, James suggested they walk a few blocks to clear their heads rather than calling his driver immediately. Streetlights cast long shadows as they strolled side by side, occasionally brushing shoulders. They spoke quietly about childhood memories, Linda's early fascination with graphic novels, James's mother's formal soirees at their grand family home. Moments of shared laughter bubbled up unexpectedly, bridging the social divide between them. Eventually, he led her back to his waiting car, reminding her that tomorrow would bring another busy day at Reed Innovations. Let's do dinner again soon, he said in a soft tone, somewhere less pretentious. Linda nodded, a mix of gratitude and confusion swirling inside her. She couldn't deny she felt drawn to him, yet she couldn't forget how his world differed so starkly from hers. As she climbed into the passenger seat, she wondered how many more strategic dinners would pass before they faced the truth of what was growing between them. The following week, Linda's designs for the new application gained traction among several departments, but not everyone was pleased. Rumors circulated about her background. A homeless woman appearing out of nowhere, personally brought in by James Reed. Some whispered that she must be exploiting him, as Vanessa Mooring once did. Others speculated that James was simply parading her around for show. Linda did her best to ignore the gossip, focusing on refining every pixel of the app's user interface. One morning, she stepped into the main conference room for a department-wide review. The environment felt tense, as if waiting for a storm to break. Present were Kevin Winters, Monica Reynolds, several team leads, and Victor Prescott, a tall, imposing vice president of operations who rarely bothered to hide his disdain for outsiders. At 53, with grey hair and a perfectly pressed suit, Victor radiated a confident arrogance. As Linda began showcasing her latest prototypes, Victor's gaze bore into her. He tapped his pen dismissively on the table. "Interesting," he said flatly. "Though I wonder if these designs align with our brand's long-term vision or if they're just flashy aesthetics." Kevin bristled. "We've tested some of her mock-ups, and early feedback is positive. Users find them intuitive and engaging." Victor waved a hand. "Sure, if it's even her own work." His implication hung in the air. Linda froze, feeling a prickle of anger flush her cheeks. Monica cleared her throat. "Our metrics show improvements in user satisfaction. The designs stand on their own merit." But Victor's gaze never left Linda. "I've been around long enough to recognize a boardroom maneuver when I see one," he said, his tone laced with condescension. "Let's not forget who brought this designer into the fold." Linda forced herself to speak calmly. "I'm here on a short-term contract. My work can be evaluated based on results, just like anyone else." A murmur rippled through the team. Some seemed sympathetic, others looked uneasy. When the meeting ended, Linda gathered her notes, determined not to let Victor's hostility show how deeply it rattled her. Afterward, she fled to the break room for a moment of respite. Sophia Kim found her there, leaning against the counter with a shaky exhale. "Ignore Victor," Sophia said, handing Linda a cup of tea. "He's just threatened by anything, or anyone, James likes." Linda managed a tight smile. "Thanks. I'm trying not to let it get to me." A short while later, Linda was summoned to James's office. His glass-walled domain overlooked the bustling city, the horizon bright with possibility. He stood by the window, a pensive look etched on his face. "I heard about the meeting," he said, turning to face her. "Victor's been a thorn in my side for a while, and he's always looking for an angle." She released a shaky breath. "I can handle it. I just didn't expect it to be so overt. He practically called me a fraud." James's expression hardened. "You're not. You've proven your capabilities. Anyone with sense can see that." Behind him, Monica hovered, her features drawn with concern. She folded her arms. "James, you need to address this toxic culture. You've let certain behaviors slide because results matter more to you than the human cost." Her tone was calm but firm. "If Linda is feeling this pressure, others probably are too." He pressed his lips together. "I built this company with a focus on performance. Maybe I let some of these attitudes fester, thinking they'd weed out the weak." He looked at Linda with an unfamiliar regret in his eyes. "I didn't realize it could harm someone like you, someone with real talent." She stepped forward, her voice trembling only slightly. "I'm not fragile, but no one should have to prove their worth by enduring personal attacks." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "You're right. I need to fix this." Monica gave him a pointed look. "You'll have to confront Victor directly. He's been using fear tactics for years, believing you approve." James nodded, silent for a moment. Then he turned to Linda. "Please, don't let him push you out. If you have any issues, come straight to me." With that, Linda felt a small relief, though she knew the battle was far from over. Victor Prescott wasn't the type to back down easily. She collected herself and returned to her desk, determined to succeed in spite of it all. She hadn't anticipated how cutthroat the corporate world could be, nor how lonely. Even as she poured heart and soul into each design, she sensed more conflict brewing. By day's end, she found herself staring at her reflection in the glossy office windows, wondering if she truly belonged in James Reed's empire, or if it would eventually chew her up and spit her back onto the street. The following week, Tension in the office intensified. Linda's prototypes were slated for a major presentation to a select group of investors. Victor, having sniffed out an opportunity to diminish her role, insinuated that any success derived more from marketing hype than her skills. Rumors circulated that he planned to take credit for Linda's breakthroughs. On the morning of the presentation, Linda arrived early to finalize last-minute tweaks. She rehearsed her talking points, mentally steeling herself for Victor's inevitable barbs. Kevin gave her a supportive pat on the shoulder, but anxiety gnawed at her all the same. When the investors filed into the executive conference room, James took his usual seat at the head of the long glass table. Victor sat nearby, exuding the cool confidence of a seasoned manipulator. Monica, stoic as ever, stood off to the side, ready to manage slides and documents. Linda began presenting her interface designs, her voice trembling slightly at first, as she walked through the user journey and highlighted key features. Though she found her stride, the investors seemed impressed, asking thoughtful questions. One or two cast wary glances at Victor, perhaps already sensing tensions beneath the polished surface. At a critical juncture, when Linda was explaining how her simplified layout improved user onboarding, Victor cleared his throat loudly. "This concept," he interjected, "originated from a preliminary outline we had months ago. We've all contributed to refining it. Isn't that right, Linda?" His tone dripped with false camaraderie. Linda froze, a jolt of anger coursing through her. She'd never seen any preliminary outline. Before she could respond, James's voice sliced through the air. "Actually, Victor, that outline was shelved for being outdated. Linda's approach is entirely new." Victor's eyebrows rose. "Well, perhaps I recall differently. We all played our part." James leaned forward, his grey eyes honing in on Victor with a fierce intensity. "Let's be clear. Linda created the core design we're discussing. She joined our team recently and delivered these prototypes from scratch. The credit is hers. If we want to discuss collaborative efforts, we can do so honestly." A hush fell over the room. Investors exchanged glances, taken aback by James's direct defense. Linda felt a warm flush of surprise, mingled with gratitude. She swallowed and resumed her presentation, though her heart pounded a bit faster. When she finished, the lead investor, an imposing woman named Diana Wells, stood to applaud politely. "This is quite impressive. I see the potential for Reed Innovations to stand out in a crowded market." She turned to Linda. "You've done remarkable work in such a short time frame." Linda managed to mumble a gracious thank you, her voice trembling with relief. On the other side of the table, Victor's jaw tightened, though he maintained a thin veneer of professionalism. After the investors exited, leaving behind encouraging feedback, Victor shot James a cold glare. "I don't appreciate being undercut in front of our partners. We're supposed to be united." James stood, meeting Victor's anger head-on. "We are united, behind the truth. If Linda's the one delivering results, she deserves recognition." Victor gave a tight nod, then stalked out. In the ensuing quiet, Monica offered Linda a small smile. "Well done. You handled yourself with poise." Then she turned to James. "That was unexpected. I've rarely seen you intervene like that." James exhaled, a hint of tension leaving his shoulders. "It needed to be done," he said. Glancing at Linda, he added, "You've shown your worth. I won't have people like Victor undermining you." Linda felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Relief at the victory, and a strange vulnerability at being defended so openly. She lingered as the meeting room emptied, her pulse still racing. Moments later, James stepped closer to her, lowering his voice so no one else would hear. "I apologize for not stepping in sooner. You shouldn't have to fight these battles alone." Before she could respond, he gently placed a hand on her arm, a brief, tentative gesture that sent a shock of warmth through her. She blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "Thank you," she managed, searching his face. He withdrew his hand, looking as if the contact surprised him too. "Let's talk more later," he said quietly. Then, with a rare, fleeting smile, he turned and left, leaving Linda alone in the silent conference room, heart pounding, her mind swimming with thoughts she couldn't yet put into words. Linda found herself anxiously smoothing the front of her blouse as the elevator ascended toward James Reed's penthouse. This was an invitation she never anticipated, an exclusive peek into his private world. As the doors slid open, she stepped into a spacious foyer of polished marble and subdued lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows along the far wall revealed a twinkling San Francisco skyline. She paused, breath catching at the breathtaking view. James appeared in the doorway, wearing a crisp shirt and casual slacks, his dark brown hair neatly combed. "You made it," he said, voice carrying a note of relief. "Come on in." She followed him past a chic living area decorated in muted greys and metallic accents. Sculptures and paintings lined the walls, clearly curated by someone who appreciated art. The place felt like an immaculate showcase rather than a lived-in home. Yet, subtle signs of personal taste emerged. A large abstract canvas over the fireplace. Vintage vinyl records stacked neatly in a corner. "I thought you might like to see my collection," James explained, leading her toward a hallway where several pieces of modern art were displayed under soft track lighting. "I don't show it to many people. Actually, hardly anyone." Linda stepped closer to one painting, enthralled by the swirling colors. "It's beautiful," she murmured, noticing the slight shift in his posture when he realized how sincerely she admired the work. He gestured to a side door. "Let me show you something else." They entered a room dramatically different from the pristine modernity outside. This office was smaller, cozier, with an old wooden desk and shelves packed with sketchbooks and art supplies. "My father insisted on business," James said quietly, "but for a while I studied art in secret. I haven't touched a brush or pencil in years." She scanned the sketches stacked on a shelf, pencil drawings of cityscapes, a few portraits, even rough concept designs that revealed a younger James's creativity. "Why did you stop?" she asked softly, turning to him. He exhaled, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his grey eyes. "Life got complicated. My father passed away. I took over Reed Innovations. Art felt impractical." Linda moved closer, a gentle smile on her lips. "It's not impractical if it feeds your soul. You're allowed to have more in your life than just spreadsheets and mergers." A faint smile touched his mouth. "You sound like I used to, back in college." The moment thickened with an unspoken closeness. She noticed how his gaze lingered on her face, as though weighing the risk of letting her in. Outside, thunder grumbled, a reminder of the storm that had brought them together weeks ago. Feeling the need for a break from the intensity, James suggested they sit down for a simple meal. In the sleek kitchen, they shared takeout from a favorite Thai restaurant of his, sipping chilled water instead of expensive wine. Somehow, this casual arrangement felt more intimate than any lavish dinner they'd had before. "What about your family?" he asked after a few bites. "I remember you mentioning your mom is out of state." Linda nodded. "She's in Oregon. She's a teacher, a kind, strong woman, but she's had health issues, and I never wanted to burden her with my problems after the fire." He watched her carefully. "You're allowed to let people help sometimes." She glanced away, recalling how, for months, she'd navigated shelters and the terrifying uncertainty of each new day. "I've learned to be cautious," she admitted, her voice tight. "The people closest to me haven't always been there when it mattered." He reached for her hand, hesitating just inches away. "I get that," he said softly. "I learned to rely on myself for most things. Trust hasn't come easily, A charge of mutual understanding bristled between them, so potent she could almost feel the air crackle. Slowly, his hand closed over hers. Her heart quickened, every nerve alert. Without warning, the door to the penthouse swung open, and Monica stepped in, holding a folder of documents. She froze at the sight of their linked hands on the countertop. "James!" "Sorry," Monica blurted, cheeks coloring as she realized she had walked into a moment. "I tried calling." They separated instantly, both feeling the abrupt rupture of intimacy. James cleared his throat, stepping away from Linda. I didn't hear the phone. Everything okay?" Monica nodded, though her eyes flicked nervously between them. "We have a problem with the new distribution contract. Thought I'd bring the files by." Linda's pulse raced, and she collected her things, sensing that this personal interlude had been broken too soon. As she slipped out, she couldn't help but glance back at James, whose expression was a mix of longing and frustration. The walls around his private realm had begun to crumble, but something told her they might go right back up if either of them felt too vulnerable, too fast. A few days later, Linda stood outside her newly rented studio apartment. It was a cramped second-floor walk-up, but it was hers, no more motel rooms or couch surfing. She'd scraped together enough from her first paycheck at Reed Innovations to secure the deposit. The building was old, with peeling paint and a stairwell that creaked ominously, but the unit itself offered a small kitchenette, a fold-out couch, and a window that let in morning light. She carefully unpacked her few belongings, a change of clothes, a toothbrush, a half-filled sketchpad. As she arranged them, she thought of James's penthouse, so sleek and foreign compared to her modest new start. While she settled in, a sharp knock sounded. Opening the door, she found Michael Donovan, her ex-boyfriend, standing there. Tall and lean at 32, he once carried an artist's charm that captivated Linda. Now, apprehension knotted her stomach. He flashed a disarming smile, but she knew better than to trust it. "Linda," he said with a theatrical sigh, "you've been ignoring my calls." She folded her arms. "I thought I made it clear I didn't want to see you." He leaned against the doorframe, posture casual. "I heard you landed a sweet gig at Reed Innovations, quite the step up from last I saw you." Her jaw tightened. "Look, Michael, if you're here because you think you can pick up where we left off, you're mistaken." She glanced over his shoulder, checking if anyone else was lurking in the hallway. "Relax," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I just want to talk. Maybe apologize for how things ended." She inhaled, recalling how he'd vanished when she needed him most, leaving her to fend for herself after the fire. The stench of betrayal still lingered. "You made your choice," she said firmly. He exhaled dramatically. "Come on, Linda. I was dealing with my own stuff. You know how finances were complicated." A biting laugh escaped her. "Yeah, well, I ended up homeless." "That was complicated too." He lowered his voice, stepping closer, crowding her personal space. "I'm trying to patch things up. I know you have a good job now. Maybe we can help each other, get back on our feet, together." Disgust churned in her stomach. "I'm doing just fine on my own," she snapped. "Please leave." Reluctantly, Michael backed away. "If that's how you want it." His gaze turned calculating. "Just remember, I know you pretty well. And I've heard rumors about you and James Reed." Her heart thudded. "What are you talking about?" "Word spreads in design circles. People claim there's something going on between you two. Could be true, could be gossip. Either way, be careful. It's a big fall from a penthouse to the street." She bristled, resisting the urge to slam the door in his face. Instead, she forced a calm tone. "Goodbye, Michael." Once he was gone, she locked the door and leaned against it, trembling. Everything about his sudden reappearance felt wrong, like a vulture circling for scraps. She tried to refocus on the positives, her new place, a real paycheck, a blossoming connection with James, whatever that might be. At Reed Innovations the next day, her unsettled mood lingered. She poured herself into the design work, refining concepts and incorporating user feedback. In the late afternoon, James noticed her drawn expression and asked if she wanted to step out for coffee. They chose a small cafe near the office, the kind with scratched wooden tables and the smell of fresh espresso. Once they were seated in a corner booth, Linda stirred her latte absently. "You seem distant," James observed gently. "Everything okay?" She hesitated, then confessed, "Michael showed up at my new apartment. He's an ex who wasn't there for me when I needed him." James's expression darkened. "Is he bothering you?" "I told him to leave, but I'm worried he'll keep coming around." She rubbed her temple, recalling Michael's insinuations about James. "I don't want to involve you in my personal mess. You've already helped me so much." James reached across the table, lightly grazing her hand. "You're not a burden," he said in a quiet tone that made her chest tighten. "If he's causing trouble, I'd rather know." She swallowed. Something in his protective demeanor both comforted her and stirred up old anxieties about being let down. Still, the sincerity in his gaze reassured her. Later that evening, as she trudged back to her studio, Linda wondered if she could outrun the ghosts of her past. The life she was building felt fragile, like a tentative sketch on delicate paper. One careless stroke could tear it apart. And though James's support felt genuine, she couldn't shake the fear that trusting him too deeply might leave her shattered once more. Tensions at Reed Innovations rose sharply just a week after Michael's unwelcome visit to Linda's apartment. Early one morning, Linda arrived at her desk to find an urgent summons from the security department. Puzzled, she took the elevator to a lower floor, a stark, fluorescent-lit space she'd never visited before. Inside a windowless conference room, Andrea Fontaine awaited her, a no-nonsense 38-year-old head of IT security with sharp, inquisitive eyes. The moment Linda stepped in, Andrea clicked a monitor to life, revealing email records. "Linda Harper," she said formally, "there's been a serious breach of confidential files. They were sent to a competitor from a workstation logged in under your credentials." Linda's heart lurched. "That's impossible," she blurted, panic coursing through her veins. "I would never do that." Andrea's face remained neutral. "Regardless, the logs show multiple transmissions. The email trail leads straight to your account." She sank into a chair, mind spinning. Who would do this, and why frame her? In a flash, the name Michael soared through her thoughts. He'd hinted at knowledge about her job, and he was no stranger to shady tactics. But how had he accessed her credentials? Before she could protest further, the door swung open. Victor Prescott walked in, the corners of his mouth curved in a smug half-smile. "Well, well," he said, letting the words hang. "It appears our new star designer might be playing both sides of the field." Linda bristled at the insinuation. "I have no idea how those emails got sent, but it wasn't me." Andrea stood, crossing her arms. "We'll investigate thoroughly. In the meantime, I have to request your company badge and laptop." Linda forced herself to stay calm. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared they could hear it. "I understand," she said shakily, sliding her badge across the table. Victor reached for it, pretending to inspect it. "Such a shame," he murmured. "James Reed had high hopes for you." Unable to remain silent, Linda locked eyes with him. "You've hated my presence here from day one," she stated. "It's convenient that these so-called breaches are pinned on me now. Is that also part of your plan?" His expression flickered with brief anger. "Watch your tone," he warned. "You're in no position to accuse anyone." Andrea cleared her throat pointedly. "That's enough, Miss Harper. I'll be in touch once my team finishes examining the logs." Until then, I'm afraid you're suspended from the premises." Shock clung to her as she left, escorted by a security guard through the humiliated hush of onlooking employees. She felt their stares, some sympathetic, others suspicious. It burned her pride that after all she'd overcome, her reputation was now hanging by a thread. By midday, she was pacing in her tiny apartment, phone clutched in her hand. She dialed James's number twice, but each call went straight to voicemail. Anxiety twisted her stomach into knots. Was he silent because he, too, believed she'd betrayed the company? At dusk, her phone finally rang. She snatched it up, heart pounding. "James!" It was Monica's voice on the other end, subdued and tense. "Linda, we need to talk. James is in back-to-back crisis meetings. Word of this supposed breach has reached the board. He's trying to contain the damage." Tears threatened to well up, but Linda blinked them away. "You have to believe me. I'm innocent. Someone planted these files." Monica paused. "I want to believe you, but there's so much evidence pointing your way. If you have any proof otherwise, now's the time to produce it." Despair welled in Linda's throat as she ended the call. She had no illusions about how damning the logs must look. And with her badge confiscated, she had no direct access to the company's systems. She felt cornered, like an animal trapped in a snare, with no clear way out, yet a seed of defiance rooted inside her. She'd fought too hard to let one malicious setup destroy her life again. If no one else would seek the truth, she'd do it herself, even if that meant confronting her own painful past to unearth the real culprit. Sleep came in fits that night as Linda replayed the accusation in her mind. She tossed and turned on her fold-out couch, haunted by the idea that Michael or Victor or both were orchestrating this fiasco. At dawn, she jolted awake and resolved to find evidence of her innocence. Her first call was to Sophia Kim, hoping the junior designer might offer insights or at least moral support. "Linda," Sophia whispered, "I tried to defend you, but the logs look bad." "Kevin's torn. He's known you a short time, but your work speaks volumes." Linda swallowed, determination surfacing. "I need a chance to prove I'm not behind this. Please, if you learn anything, let me know." By late morning, she was perched on a stool in her kitchenette, poring over old notebooks where she kept personal design notes. That's when her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Call me. Urgent." A chill ran down her spine as she recognized the area code. It was from Michael. Against her better judgment, she dialed the number. "Linda?" he answered, feigning concern. "I heard about your incident at Reed Innovations." She stiffened. "What do you want?" He took his time, as if savoring her discomfort. "Let's just say I might know who's framing you. It'd be a shame if the truth got buried. Maybe we can meet and talk." Her grip tightened on the phone. "You expect me to trust you now?" He sighed dramatically. "Believe it or not, I never wanted you to get in trouble. Victor is an acquaintance. We made a deal, but I had no idea how far he'd go. If you want the details, come see me." Linda's mind swirled. Could Michael be telling the truth, or was this just another manipulation? Ultimately, she saw little choice. "Fine," she said flatly, "but I'm not coming alone." She hung up and dialed James. To her relief, he answered on the third ring. "Linda," he said, voice sounding both anxious and relieved, "where are you? I've been trying to sort out this mess, but the evidence, it's not looking good." She exhaled sharply. "I know. Listen, I might have a lead. Michael contacted me, claiming to know something about how these emails got sent. I'm meeting him soon." Silence hovered for a heartbeat. Then James replied, "Michael? The ex-boyfriend who bailed on you after the fire? Yes, I don't trust him, but I've got nothing else. Can you come with me? Or at least meet me after I talk to him?" Text me the time and place, James said, determination edging his tone. And Linda, I still believe in you. I'm sorry it took me a moment to process everything. Her chest loosened at his words. Thank you, she murmured, ending the call with a sense of relief. She arranged to meet Michael at a half-deserted coffee shop near the Mission District. The decor was a patchwork of mismatched furniture, and a stale smell of espresso hung in the air. She spotted him in a corner booth, wearing a leather jacket that had seen better days. He greeted her with a tight smile. Glad you came. She slid into the seat opposite him, crossing her arms. Start talking. He leaned in, voice low. Victor wanted to undermine James Reed's new direction for the company. He paid me to keep tabs on you, said if you got too close to James, I was to intervene. The plan was to plant suspicious emails under your name to sabotage both you and James. Linda's heart raced, anger mounting. How did you get my login info? He scratched the back of his neck. Remember the day I visited your new place? You left to get water, and your laptop was open. I installed a keylogger. She felt sick, recalling how briefly she'd left him alone in the living area. You were willing to ruin me, she said, her voice trembling. All for money. Michael faltered, cheeks reddening. I didn't think it would blow up this fast. I'm sorry, Linda, truly. She pushed back from the table, disgust curling her lip. I can't believe I ever loved you. Just then, the bell above the door chimed. James stepped in, scanning the shop until he saw them. Relief flickered in Linda's eyes as he approached. Michael quickly slid a small USB drive across the table. This has the keylogger logs. Maybe it'll help prove you were framed. James grabbed it. We'll have our security expert examine it, he said icily. If it shows what you claim, Linda will be cleared. Michael swallowed hard. I did what was asked of me, just be careful with Victor. He's not done. Standing, Linda fought back a surge of conflicting emotions. Betrayal, rage, relief. James wrapped a reassuring arm around her shoulders, guiding her toward the exit. She clutched the USB as if it were a lifeline, her hope of exposing the truth now resting in a small plastic device. That same evening, Linda and James gathered in Monica's office to lay out the evidence. The space was bathed in the muted glow of a single desk lamp, the blinds drawn to block out prying eyes. Outside the door, the hum of after-hours air conditioning underscored the tension that radiated within the room. Monica perched on the edge of her desk, arms crossed. She had known James for a decade, and this clandestine meeting clearly rattled her. So, you're telling me Michael was working with Victor to sabotage you both? She asked, eyebrows knitting in concern. Linda nodded, handing over the USB drive. He installed a keylogger on my laptop. That's likely how they sent those emails through my account. James exhaled, running a hand through his hair. It aligns with Victor's pattern. He's been pushing back against the company's new direction, and this fiasco gave him an excuse to undermine Linda and me. He probably wanted to force the board to question my leadership. Monica slid the drive into her computer, and the three of them watched as folder after folder of log data flashed onto the screen. Indeed, timestamps confirmed that an external device had recorded Linda's keystrokes and had triggered unauthorized emails at specific times. The evidence was damning, but it also offered Linda's vindication. Monica stared at the monitor, then turned to Linda with a look of genuine remorse. I'm sorry I doubted you. I thought I was protecting James from another betrayal. Linda's eyes softened. I understand. This place has a history of sharks in expensive suits. She offered a hesitant smile. I'm just relieved we have proof now. James tapped his foot anxiously, mind already leaping to the next step. Victor won't go down quietly. We need a plan. If we confront him without the board present, he'll deny everything. But if we do this in front of key decision-makers and show them the logs, Monica finished the thought. He'll have nowhere to hide, but we have to do it strategically. If the board sees we're handling this responsibly, they'll support the changes you want to make in the company. Linda studied James, noticing the conflict etched into his features. This was more than a corporate chess match. It was a fight for his ideals, ones she had watched him slowly embrace as he learned the value of genuine human connection. He inhaled deeply. We'll set a meeting tomorrow with the board and legal counsel. Monica, can you compile a report detailing everything? I want it airtight. She nodded. I'll work through the night if I have to. Linda shifted from foot to foot. What do you need from me? James turned to her, his voice softening. Rest. This has been a nightmare for you. We'll call you in when it's time to present the evidence. Monica stood. I'll walk you out, Linda. Let James start pulling files. As they headed toward the elevator, Monica cast Linda a sidelong glance. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. James has changed lately. He's more open, more human. You've been a big part of that. Heat rose to Linda's cheeks. I don't know about that, she mumbled, but her heart swelled at the thought. They stepped onto the elevator, and Monica pressed the button for the lobby. After Vanessa, I never thought I'd see him trust anyone again, especially not this quickly. Monica's expression turned solemn. Don't hurt him. He's got a lot on the line, his heart included. Linda felt a pang of surprise. She'd spent so long worrying that James might hurt her, she hadn't considered the vulnerability she posed to him. I'd never do that intentionally, she said. The doors opened to the silent lobby, and Monica offered a small, hopeful smile before turning back upstairs. Linda crossed the polished floor alone, her thoughts a blur of gratitude and apprehension. In a single day, she'd gone from being accused of corporate espionage to forming an alliance with James's closest confidant. Stepping outside into the mild night air, she took a moment to gaze at the towering building. It no longer felt like a cold fortress set against her. It felt like a place where she'd begun forging deeper connections, not just professional, but personal as well. Clutching her purse tight, Linda started walking. With Victor's scheme finally exposed, a weight had lifted from her shoulders. Yet she knew tomorrow's confrontation would be no easy task. Still, for the first time since she'd met James Reed in that rain-soaked street, she believed they might have a chance, both to save her career and to nurture something more profound between them. The next morning, James Reed summoned the entire board of Reed Innovations, as well as key department heads, to the main presentation auditorium. The atmosphere bristled with anticipation. Speculation ran wild about the purpose of this emergency gathering. Linda Harper stood off to one side, her heart pounding as she clutched a small stack of printed screenshots and reports. Monica Reynolds quietly reviewed her own notes nearby, sharing a determined nod with Linda. They were ready to reveal the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed Linda's career. At precisely 9 o'clock, James took the podium. He wore a dark suit that emphasized his height and athletic build, his gray eyes sweeping the room with unwavering composure. Victor Prescott sat in the front row, arms crossed over his pristine suit jacket, regarding James with barely disguised contempt. Other executives, including Benjamin Harris, the board president, filled the rows behind him, whispering to one another. "Thank you all for coming," James began, his tone cool yet resonant. "Recent events have cast doubt on the integrity of one of our most promising projects. An alleged leak of confidential information implicated our lead designer, Linda Harper." He paused, letting the tension hang in the air. "Today, we present evidence clarifying what truly happened and who was responsible." He gestured to Monica, who stepped forward and projected a set of digital logs on the massive screen. The data displayed timestamps, IP addresses, and keystroke records recovered from the USB drive Linda had obtained. Monica's voice rang out, calm and precise. Our forensic analysis reveals these emails were sent using a keylogger installed on Ms. Harper's personal device. The breach was orchestrated by a third party, exploiting her credentials without her knowledge. A current of uneasy murmurs rippled through the auditorium. Victor's posture stiffened as he realized the evidence was more concrete than he had anticipated. Still, he schooled his features into a mask of disbelief. Furthermore, James said, stepping back to the microphone, we discovered that Victor Prescott had ties to an individual named Michael Donovan. Mr. Donovan has admitted to collaborating with Victor to frame Linda Harper and thereby undermine our recent corporate shifts. At this, Victor stood abruptly. This is outrageous, he barked, scanning the crowd for support. I demand to see actual proof. These so-called logs could have been fabricated. Monica advanced to the edge of the stage, her eyes never leaving Victor. All logs were verified by our head of IT security, Andrea Fontaine, she replied. Additionally, we have corroborating statements from Mr. Donovan, who provided the keylogger data himself. A hush fell over the room as Andrea, seated near the front, gave a curt nod. The material is authentic, she confirmed, her voice carrying enough authority to silence skeptics. Victor's face reddened. He glanced around, clearly calculating his next move. I have served this company for years, he snapped. Why would I sabotage it? James answered without hesitation. Because you believed my leadership was weakening Reed Innovations. You opposed a more humane, employee-focused direction. You thought if Linda, and by extension my new initiatives, were discredited, you could steer the company back to its old ways. Benjamin Harris rose, peering over his spectacles at Victor. This is a serious breach of ethics. We'll convene immediately to decide your status. For now, you're relieved of all duties. Victor looked as if he might protest, but under the weight of the evidence and the collective stares of the board, he sank back into his seat. Two security personnel, alerted by Monica, approached. At Benjamin's nod, they escorted Victor from the auditorium, his protests echoing down the corridor. With the instigator removed, James turned to Linda and beckoned her onto the stage. She hesitated, then walked forward, keeping her chin up despite the trembling in her stomach. In light of these revelations, James announced, I'm formally reinstating Linda Harper as lead designer. The accusations against her were false, and we owe her an apology. A wave of applause rose from the employees present, many of whom had suspected Linda's innocence all along. Relief washed over Linda so powerfully that she nearly forgot to breathe. When she glanced at James, she saw unspoken gratitude and something deeper in his eyes, pride, perhaps, or genuine admiration. The crisis that had threatened to uproot them both was finally laid bare, and together they had vanquished it in public view. In the aftermath of the public confrontation, the corridors of Reed Innovations buzzed with discussions about Victor's abrupt downfall. Some employees felt vindicated that the toxic atmosphere he had helped perpetuate was now exposed. Others worried about the company's stability under James Reed's evolving leadership. Linda Harper, however, found herself flooded with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Late in the day, Benjamin Harris called an emergency board session. By evening, word spread, Victor Prescott was officially terminated, pending a thorough legal investigation. Most believed criminal charges were likely, given the extent of the sabotage. For James, it was a bittersweet victory. He had uprooted a long-standing pillar of aggression and fear, but the process revealed cracks in the culture he'd once championed. Exhausted from the day's chaos, Linda hovered by her new desk in the design department, trying to organize lingering tasks. She paused when James appeared behind her. "Come with me," he said gently, leading her away from prying eyes. They ended up in a smaller conference room. Its glass walls offered a partial view of the cityscape at dusk. James closed the door. When he turned back to Linda, his usually steely features appeared softer, more open. "I wanted to check on you," he began, "and to say I'm sorry this happened at all." She offered a tentative smile. "It's not your fault." "You didn't know what Victor was doing," he exhaled. "But I should have seen the signs sooner. I created an environment that rewarded cold efficiency and didn't clamp down on bullying tactics. This mess was the result." She stepped closer, touching his hand lightly. "You're changing that culture now. Look at what you did today. You exposed wrongdoing in front of everyone." "It's a step forward." For a moment they stood in silence, the city lights flickering against the glass. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I also want to talk to you about us." Her heart fluttered, but she kept her expression measured. "All right." James searched her eyes. "I know we've grown closer, especially under unusual circumstances, but I don't want you to feel I'm offering you special treatment or pressure. If you'd prefer we keep things strictly professional." Linda shook her head, interrupting him gently. "I don't want that. This whole experience has been strange and intense, but I can't deny how I feel. I trust you." Relief flickered in his gaze. He reached for her, then seemed to catch himself. "Let's go slow," he murmured, voice turning warm. "We've both been through enough upheaval." Her stomach fluttered at the sincerity in his tone. "Slow sounds good," she whispered back, stepping into the circle of his arms for just a moment. The sensation of his heartbeat against hers felt like a quiet promise of safer days ahead. When they parted, James nodded toward the door. "We should let Monica and the others wrap up. Tomorrow, I'll have to address the entire staff about Victor's dismissal and the new direction we'll take. I want you there at my side." She found herself smiling. "I'd be honored." Outside in the hallway, they encountered Marcus Chen, James's longtime friend and the company's CFO. A short, perceptive man in his mid-30s, Marcus wore an expression of profound curiosity. "James, quite a day," he said, then turned to Linda. "Glad to see you're cleared. We need more genuine talent around here." "Thank you," Linda replied, acknowledging his casual warmth. Marcus gave James a sideways look. "The board is ready to fully support a culture shift, you know. With Victor gone, we're free to implement more community-oriented policies, if that's the path you still want." James's eyes flicked to Linda before returning to Marcus. "That is the path I want, yes, and I'll need your help to make it stick." "Count on it," Marcus replied, heading off with a polite wave. As Linda gathered her bag to leave, exhaustion tugged at every muscle. Yet she couldn't ignore a buoyant feeling that swelled within her. The truth had triumphed, her name was cleared, and her connection with James was no longer overshadowed by doubt. The city lights felt friendlier that night as she made her way home. Tomorrow promised a new chapter for Reed Innovations, a place she once viewed as just another corporate giant, but was now beginning to see as a community she might help transform. For the first time in ages, Linda felt the stirring of hope, not just for her career, but for a life woven with deeper meaning and authentic love. The next few days flew by in a swirl of activity. James took bold steps to revise company policies, championing transparency and employee well-being. Linda worked long hours refining the user interface for the flagship app, buoyed by a sense of renewed purpose. Even so, she and James found themselves juggling endless responsibilities, leaving little time for anything personal. But one night, James finally called Linda with a straightforward proposition. "Let's have dinner, an actual date, away from the office." His tone carried a playful edge that made her smile. Excitement fluttered in her stomach as she chose a simple yet elegant outfit. recalling how their previous meals had always been coated in professional veneer. This time felt different. No spreadsheets, no hidden agendas, just two people who wanted to learn more about each other. They met at a small, family-owned Italian restaurant perched near the waterfront. The place was unpretentious. Wooden tables, soft lighting, the scent of garlic and tomato sauce wafting through the air. Outside the wide windows, the San Francisco Bay shimmered in the evening light. James arrived first, looking slightly out of place in a neatly pressed dress shirt, though he seemed more at ease than Linda had ever seen him in a restaurant. He greeted her with a brief, warm smile. "You look great," he said, pulling out her chair. She felt a little shy. "You too, it's nice to see you without a board meeting in the background." He chuckled, placing a hand over hers for just a moment. "Agreed." They ordered bruschetta and a pasta special, and then settled into conversation that drifted far from the corporate world. Linda found herself talking about her childhood in Oregon, weekends hiking in thick forests, the way her mother's love of literature sparked Linda's own creative interests. James, in turn, opened up about his father's rigid discipline, the pressure to excel, and the guilt he sometimes felt for not living up to an impossible ideal. As the evening wore on, the tension that often surrounded James seemed to melt. He laughed easily at Linda's stories of art school mishaps. She teased him good-naturedly about his meticulously organized desk. Each small revelation felt like a new stepping stone across a once uncertain chasm. After dinner, James suggested a short walk along the pier. The night air was cool, the water gently lapping against wooden pilings. The old boards creaked underfoot, and a few street musicians played soft tunes in the distance. Linda wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, but couldn't stop smiling. She glanced at him, curiosity sparkling in her green eyes. "Does your mother know how things have changed for you?" He frowned slightly. "Elizabeth and we're distant. She knows about the shake-up at the company, but I haven't really talked to her about my personal life. She's never approved of my choices unless they serve the Reed family legacy." Linda nudged his arm with hers. "I'm sure she cares about you in her own way. Maybe she just doesn't know how to show it." He paused by a low railing, gazing out at the rippling water under the moonlight. "Maybe," he murmured. "For so long, I kept my emotions buried. Even now, it's challenging to be fully honest about what I want, who I want to be with." Her heart thudded at his words. Stepping closer, she reached for his hand. In the hush of the night, she could feel his pulse thrumming against her fingers. "I'm glad you're being honest now," she said softly. He turned toward her, the warm glow of a nearby lamppost illuminating the subtle worry lines on his forehead. "I've never done this, taken someone out on a date and felt this." He trailed off, searching for the right phrase. "Felt what?" she prompted gently. He exhaled, a tender smile curving his lips. "A sense of rightness, as if this is where I should have been all along." Her cheeks flushed, and she tilted her head up. In a moment both careful and fearless, James leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her lips. It was a brief, delicate spark that conveyed more truth than either had managed to say aloud. When they pulled apart, he tucked a stray strand of her hair behind her ear. Neither spoke, but the air between them shimmered with promise. The uncertain paths that had brought them there, near accidents, betrayals, corporate battles, faded into the background, leaving only a sense of quiet awe at how far they'd come and how much further they could go together. A few weeks later, Linda Harper stood at the entrance of a stylish art gallery in downtown San Francisco, her heart pounding with excitement and nerves. The gallery's polished concrete floors and white walls gleamed under soft spotlights. Large windows framed the bustling city outside. Tonight marked the grand opening of Linda's first public art exhibition since losing nearly everything in the fire. She'd spent her spare hours, often late into the night, working on new pieces inspired by her recent journey. From sketches depicting her life on the streets to bold, colorful canvases exploring themes of rebirth, each creation told a story of resilience. Claire Morrison, a respected gallery owner with a sharp eye, had offered Linda a prime spot for a small solo show. It was a dream Linda once feared would never come true again. James arrived early, offering her a reassuring smile as she hovered by the entrance. He looked effortlessly confident in a tailored suit, yet his warm expression betrayed genuine pride. "Ready?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. Linda took a breath, nerves thrumming. "As ready as I'll ever be." Inside, clusters of art enthusiasts mingled, sipping wine and murmuring in hushed tones about the pieces lining the walls. Among them, familiar faces materialized. Monica Reynolds, who, despite her usual corporate polish, seemed enraptured by the paintings. Sophia Kim, excitedly pointing out the design influence in Linda's work, and Marcus Chen, who had brought his wife, Sarah, to support Linda. As the evening progressed, a small but influential crowd formed around Linda's display. One of the paintings that drew particular attention was a portrait of a man standing in front of towering skyscrapers, rendered in deep blues and silvers. Though the subject's face was partially obscured, the posture and intensity echoed James's own aura. Those who knew the real story exchanged knowing glances. During a brief lull, Claire Morrison introduced Linda to Lawrence Bishop, a 50-something art critic known for his discerning eye. He studied Linda's largest canvas, a vivid representation of a rainy San Francisco street, and offered an appreciative nod. "You've captured the city's atmosphere with real tenderness," he remarked. "Tell me about your inspiration." Swallowing nerves, Linda explained how the downpour symbolized turmoil, but also cleansing. A pivotal moment when one chapter of her life ended, and a new one began. She avoided mentioning James directly, but her gaze flicked to him across the room, where he was listening intently to another guest. Later, James found her near the refreshment table, slipping his hand gently into hers. "You're a hit," he teased, noting the small crowd eager to speak with her. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Linda laughed softly. "It does, but it's also overwhelming. A few months ago, I couldn't have imagined this." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for encouraging me to keep creating." He leaned in to speak quietly, aware of the many eyes in their direction. "You did this yourself. I'm just here to applaud." A flash of movement drew their attention. Michael Donovan stood by one of Linda's paintings. She stiffened, but before she could react, he raised both hands to show he came in peace. He appeared somewhat subdued, a far cry from his usual swagger. Slipping away from James, Linda approached, bracing herself for confrontation. "Your work is incredible," Michael said, gesturing to the painting. "I never doubted your talent, you know." She kept her voice low. "Why are you here?" He glanced around. "This is your night. I won't spoil it. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." A swirl of unresolved anger and regret twisted in Linda's chest, but in that moment, her paintings hanging proudly in a gallery, James's supportive presence at her back, she realized Michael no longer held power over her. "Apology noted," she replied, turning away to rejoin her guests. Later in the evening, as James raised a glass of champagne to toast Linda's success, he offered a heartfelt tribute in front of the gathered crowd. Linda Harper's art captures not only her personal journey, but also something universal about struggle and hope. I'm honored to celebrate this moment with her. Linda felt tears prick her eyes. She scanned the gallery, crowded with faces of friends, colleagues, and a few strangers who admired her work purely for its creative merit. In that instant, she understood the depth of what she had gained, a renewed artistic identity, a blossoming romance, and the resilience to transform misfortune into meaning. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Linda Harper found herself at James's penthouse once again. But this time, the air was different, filled with a cozy domestic hum rather than businesslike formality. She had brought over a few essentials to personalize a corner of his otherwise minimalist living room: a soft throw blanket, a potted fern, and a stack of her favorite design books. He insisted she treat the space like her own. Ever since Victor's departure, Reed Innovations had been undergoing a remarkable shift. Employee feedback sessions were introduced, charitable outreach programs were expanded, and James openly led discussions about fostering creativity at every level of the company. Linda played a pivotal role in setting up an innovation hub, a place where staff could experiment with new ideas, bridging technology and the arts. That afternoon, the two of them sat side by side on the spacious couch, finalizing some sketches for the office redesign. Linda's hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and James looked relaxed in a simple collared shirt and jeans. The sunlight streamed in from the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the polished floors gleam. "Are you sure about removing those glass partitions?" Linda asked, pointing at a rough layout on her tablet. "It'll mean losing a hallmark of the old Reed Innovations look." James nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. The old look symbolized a corporate fortress. "We need more openness. We want to show people we're not just about profit, but about real human connection." She glanced at him, admiring how easily he now spoke of empathy and community. "It's quite a transformation," she murmured. "You've come a long way from the man who fired an executive in a single cold meeting." He gave a self-conscious laugh, threading his fingers through hers. "Maybe I have. And I owe a lot of that growth to you." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. The caller ID read Elizabeth Reed. He inhaled, tension creeping back into his shoulders. "I should answer. She knows I've been restructuring the company." Linda offered a supportive nod, rising from the couch to give him privacy. She drifted into the adjacent room, a sunlit home office that had evolved into a creative corner, complete with a drafting table, spare canvases, and James's old sketchbooks. A sense of warmth filled her as she recognized that he was reclaiming the artistic side of himself he'd once abandoned. From the living room, she heard low, clipped tones as James spoke with his mother. Although the conversation was subdued, the strain in his voice suggested it wasn't entirely pleasant. After several minutes, he ended the call and rejoined Linda, shoulders tight. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. He let out a long breath. "She wants me to visit the Reed family mansion. There's some memorial for my father she's hosting, and she thinks it would look bad if I don't attend. She also hinted she'd like to meet, well, you." Surprise flickered in Linda's eyes. "Me? Are you sure she's ready for that?" He lifted her hand, threading their fingers together. "I'm not certain, but I am certain I don't want to hide this anymore. You're important to me." An odd mix of nerves and excitement coursed through her. She'd spent so many years scraping by, never imagining she'd be entangled with a powerful family's intricate dynamics. Yet the way James looked at her, open, resolute, melted much of her anxiety. They sank back onto the couch, leaning against each other. Outside, the city's skyline sparkled in the afternoon sun, no longer a distant fortress, but a living tapestry of possibility. She rested her head on his shoulder, imagining a future where her art and his technology seamlessly combined, fostering genuine change for people who needed it. In a soft voice, Linda asked, "What do you want from here on out?" James gazed at her, sincerity filling his eyes. "I want to keep building this company, our life together. I want to make space for creativity and compassion, not just for us, but for everyone who crosses our path." Her heart felt full at his words, remembering how once she doubted love, security, and second chances. Now, in this penthouse that had transformed from an intimidating glass tower into a warm sanctuary, she believed in the new equilibrium they had forged. They still had challenges ahead, family expectations, further corporate battles, and personal insecurities that lingered in the shadows. But in that tranquil moment, Linda knew they would face it all hand in hand, sustained by the resilience they'd already proven, and the love that had blossomed from a stormy, near-accidental encounter on a rainy San Francisco street. A crisp autumn wind swept through the manicured grounds of the Reed family mansion, stirring leaves into swirling eddies. Linda Harper felt her pulse spike the moment she and James stepped out of the sleek sedan. Towering oak trees lined the circular driveway, leading up to the stately, ivy-covered residence. The place was more sprawling estate than home, its facade evoking old-world grandeur. James took her hand, squeezing gently as they approached the massive front doors. Standing on the threshold, Linda recalled every conversation she'd had with him about his complicated upbringing, his father's relentless ambition, his mother Elizabeth's distant formality. Now she was about to walk into that history, uncertain of the reception she'd receive. A distinguished older gentleman, George Mitchell, opened the door. He was in his early 70s, tall and slim in a neatly pressed suit. With a respectful nod, he said, "Welcome back, Mr. Reed. Please come inside." Stepping into the grand foyer, Linda was struck by the contrast between James's modern penthouse and this ornate environment. Antique mirrors, intricate molding, and family portraits that spanned generations all pointed to deep-seated traditions. A portrait of James's father hung prominently above a marble fireplace, the man's stern gaze seeming to follow them. Elizabeth Reed made her entrance with the grace of a seasoned hostess. At 68, she carried herself with a refined air, impeccably styled grey hair, a tailored navy suit, and discerning hazel eyes. "James," she greeted in a measured tone, leaning in for a brief hug. She then turned her gaze on Linda, offering a formal smile. "You must be Linda Harper." Linda fought to keep her voice steady. "Yes, Mrs. Reed. It's a pleasure to meet you." Elizabeth offered her hand in a polite gesture. "Come. We have refreshments in the sitting room. Let's speak comfortably." They followed her through an opulent corridor into a spacious sitting area overlooking a lush garden. Silver trays with tea and biscuits were arranged on an ornate coffee table. As Linda settled onto a stiff Victorian sofa, she felt James's reassuring presence beside her, though his own tension was evident in the set of his shoulders. Elizabeth poured tea, each motion precise. "I appreciate your attending this memorial event for David. It's an annual gathering, mostly family friends, a few board members who were close to him. I was surprised when James said he would bring a guest." Linda managed a polite nod. "I'm honored to be here." Elizabeth's gaze flickered. "I hear you've been instrumental in James's recent changes at Reed Innovations. Quite the journey from your earlier circumstances." Though the question wasn't overt, Linda felt the weight of Elizabeth's judgment. She cleared her throat. "I came to San Francisco to pursue design work. James gave me an opportunity, and I've worked hard to contribute. The company's culture is changing for the better, and I'm proud to be a part of it." Elizabeth tilted her head, as though measuring Linda's sincerity. "Yes, I've heard about the new philanthropic initiatives. Some board members find it progressive, but others have concerns about profitability. I must confess, I'm curious how this reorientation will impact the Reed legacy." James intervened, voice steady. "Mother, the Reed legacy isn't just about wealth or high-profile deals. It can be about community and creativity, too. That's what Linda and I are building." Elizabeth's expression tightened, but she remained composed. "We shall see." With a polite gesture, she guided them to a set of French doors leading out to the garden. "Shall we walk? Our guests will be arriving soon." The three strolled amid perfectly trimmed hedges and elaborate flower beds. Elizabeth occasionally pointed out a statue or a patch of roses that commemorated some family anecdote. Linda soaked in each detail, trying to find glimpses of the boy James once was among these imposing surroundings. When they reached a secluded corner beneath a centuries-old oak, Elizabeth paused. "James, your father had plans for you, plans you followed diligently until recent changes. I only hope you understand what's at stake if your new direction fails." He exhaled. "I'm aware of the risks, but success has to mean more than stock prices." Elizabeth cast a long glance at Linda, then her son. For a moment, something softened in her face, perhaps a reluctant acceptance that the world moves on from old legacies. "Very well," she said at last, turning back toward the mansion. "Come. Our guests will be here shortly. Make yourselves comfortable." As Linda took James's arm and followed Elizabeth, she couldn't help noting how each step into this ancestral home felt like stepping deeper into James's past. It was a realm where tradition and expectation weighed heavily, yet she sensed a subtle shift, an opening for something new. And whether Elizabeth Reed fully approved or not, Linda and James were determined to redefine what it meant to carry the family name forward. A week after the memorial gathering at the Reed mansion, Linda found herself back at Reed Innovations, standing in the newly renovated lobby. Gone were the austere glass partitions and rigid lines. In their place, warm accent walls and art installations hinted at the company's evolving ethos. Employees milled about, sipping coffee and engaging in spontaneous brainstorming sessions in a newly installed lounge area. James had commissioned local artists, including Linda, to create pieces that reflected the themes of collaboration and innovation. Everywhere she looked, there were sketches of new ideas pinned on colorful boards. Even the security desk had been redesigned to feel welcoming rather than intimidating. Monica greeted Linda near a digital display showcasing community outreach programs. "Busy day?" she asked, offering a friendly smile. Linda nodded. "I'm finalizing designs for our next app update, plus working on that artist's mentorship initiative. We're calling it the Bridge Project, right?" Monica nodded. "Yes, it pairs local art students, some from underfunded schools, with our tech teams. James wants them to see how art and technology can merge to create social impact." Linda's excitement grew. The notion of bridging art and tech resonated deeply with her. Her personal story had shown her how creative expression could ignite possibilities, and she relished bringing that perspective to Reed Innovations. They made their way to a large conference room where the department leads had gathered. Marcus Chen, the CFO, was already reviewing slides on a massive touchscreen. "Financially, the changes are causing some volatility," he explained to the group. "But in terms of brand perception and employee engagement, we're seeing remarkable improvement." James, standing at the front, folded his arms with a thoughtful nod. "Short-term dips in stock price might worry some investors, but if we demonstrate tangible community impact and maintain product excellence, I believe the long-term benefits will outweigh any temporary hurdles." Richard Blackwell, the 58-year-old marketing director, chimed in. "It's crucial we communicate this new direction effectively. The media can either celebrate or crucify us for these changes, and we need a consistent message." Linda studied James's profile as he responded, remembering the day she first entered his sterile office. He had been brusque, dismissing anything that didn't yield immediate, immeasurable results. Now, he spoke with conviction about valuing humanity alongside profit. It felt like standing beside an entirely different person, yet the same man she'd seen glimmers of all along. Toward the end of the meeting, James turned to Linda. "We're unveiling the new app features in a month, right?" She nodded. "Yes, the user interface is nearly ready. I'm collaborating with Sophia and Kevin to ensure the design aligns with the more collaborative spirit we want to convey." "Perfect," he said, a faint smile touching his eyes. "Let's keep pushing forward." After the meeting ended, Linda lingered, organizing files. James approached, placing a warm hand on her shoulder. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "Good," she answered, though her expression turned pensive. "Your mother's event. It was intense. I know it wasn't exactly welcoming for me, but at least she didn't chase me out with a pitchfork." He offered a rueful chuckle. "No, but she's cautious. We'll see if she comes around." He paused, gaze turning thoughtful. "I'm proud of what you're doing here. You've become a vital part of the company, of my life too." A tender moment passed between them, until a sudden knock on the doorframe announced Benjamin Harris, the board president. He stepped in, looking as though he'd just jogged across the office. "James, Linda, sorry to interrupt, but the mayor's office reached out. They're interested in partnering on that community art initiative. There's a meeting tomorrow morning if you can both attend." Linda's heart lifted at the prospect. "I'd love to be there." James nodded in agreement. "Count us in." As Harris departed, Linda turned to James with an excited grin. "You see, the city is noticing. We're making real changes." He let out a slow breath, nodding. "So much has shifted at the company, and between us, feels like I've waited a lifetime for this kind of purpose." She leaned in, brushing her hand against his cheek. "You and me both. Let's keep going." And so they did, stepping out of the conference room side by side, each fueled by a sense of possibility. Overhead, the sleek new lighting caught reflections from the art installations, scattering gentle rainbows across the polished floor, a vivid reminder that Reed Innovations was no longer just about towering glass and steel, but about the shared humanity that could thrive within its walls. A month later, Linda Harper stepped into the airy loft they had just rented for a new community arts program. The building, once abandoned, stood on a quiet street in an older neighborhood of San Francisco. Sunlight streamed through tall windows onto cracked concrete floors, revealing dust motes dancing in the rays. Yet, despite its rough edges, the space brimmed with potential. "This is it," Linda announced, her voice echoing against bare walls. James followed behind, scanning the industrial beams overhead. He wore an open-collar shirt and carried a clipboard, looking both out of place and entirely in his element. The plan was to transform this loft into a hub for aspiring artists, people from underprivileged backgrounds or, like Linda once was, dealing with homelessness. Reed Innovations, under James's leadership, had purchased the property to provide a fully equipped studio, mentorship, and even small grants. "This space needs a lot of work," Monica noted, stepping carefully over scattered debris. She had come to meet them on her day off, wearing jeans and sneakers instead of her usual business attire. "We'll need volunteers to clean it up, plus a budget for supplies." James tapped his pen on the clipboard. "We'll cover renovations, and Linda will lead the art direction. Let's find local partners, non-profits, maybe even city funding." Hearing him talk about philanthropic partnerships made Linda's heart swell with gratitude. She remembered her own dire circumstances, losing her apartment, surviving on odd gigs. Now she was in a position to help others find their footing through art. They began walking the perimeter, mapping out potential segments for painting, sculpture, digital design, and even a small gallery space. Linda envisioned young people rummaging through donated brushes and paints, discovering their voices through color and form. The transformation mirrored her own life, from ashes to something vibrant and hopeful. Late in the afternoon, Linda caught a glimpse of Zoe Williams, a young artist she had met by chance at a homeless shelter months before. Zoe, now living in subsidized housing and excited by the prospect of a safe creative space, had come to volunteer. With teal curls and a quiet determination in her eyes, she surveyed the battered walls and turned to Linda, grinning. "We're gonna make it beautiful," she said simply. They got to work, clearing debris and scrubbing surfaces. Monica called in additional staff from Reed Innovations who wanted to volunteer. Even Elizabeth Reed made a discreet donation, surprising Linda. Though Elizabeth had yet to openly endorse everything her son was doing, the donation spoke volumes, an olive branch, perhaps. As dusk fell, the group paused for pizza and sodas, spreading out on battered folding chairs. Linda sipped her drink, resting her head briefly on James's shoulder. A sense of community pulsed around them, people from different backgrounds laughing and trading ideas. In the corner, Zoe doodled on a scrap of drywall, mapping out a mural she planned to paint. Monica nudged Linda. "Look around. This is bigger than just an art studio." Linda nodded, her gaze taking in the clusters of volunteers, the battered walls on the verge of rebirth. "It's a place where someone like me could have found hope," she said quietly. James wrapped an arm around her waist, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "We'll finish it in no time." Then launch the official program for local artists to have space and mentorship. They continued working until the stars dotted the sky outside the old loft's windows. The once dusty floor gradually cleared, and walls that had stood silent for years seemed to echo with new energy. Zoe sketched the outline of a phoenix on one far wall, the bird's wings stretching across the old bricks, symbolic of renewal and resilience. By the time they locked up for the night, Linda felt a pleasant ache in her muscles from the manual labor, but a buoyant lightness in her heart. As she and James walked hand in hand back to his car, she took one last look at the loft's facade. It was still rough, still carrying scars of neglect, yet brimming with promise. They drove off, passing the neighborhood streets where flickering streetlights revealed glimpses of everyday struggles, people huddling in doorways, scrappy corner stores closing for the night. It struck Linda that they were stepping into a cycle of giving back what she once desperately needed, a chance. And in that cycle, she and James found renewed purpose, forging a future that wove art, technology, compassion, and love into a single, unbreakable tapestry. The one-year anniversary of that fateful stormy night arrived with mild, drizzly weather, more a gentle reminder of rain than the fierce downpour Linda Harper recalled. She and James agreed to mark the occasion in a sentimental way, starting with a breakfast at the very diner where they had shared their first meal. They slipped into a red vinyl booth at the Blue Moon Diner, nostalgic smiles on their faces. Rose, the gray-haired waitress who had served them a year ago, recognized them instantly. "Well, would you look at this?" she exclaimed, placing 2 mugs of fresh coffee in front of them. "I told you both you'd make it through, though I never imagined you'd come back together like this." Linda laughed, warmth flooding her. James glanced around the diner, a far cry from his usual upscale haunts, and chuckled. "This place means more to me than any Michelin-starred restaurant ever could," he admitted, giving Linda's hand a squeeze under the table. When they finished their meal, they strolled outside under a light drizzle. The city had that fresh, slightly damp scent, and the sidewalks glistened with puddles. James suggested they visit the spot where their paths had first intersected. Though the route took them through a less affluent neighborhood, Linda felt no anxiety, just a profound sense of how far she'd come. Eventually, they arrived at the narrow street corner, traffic passing in sporadic bursts. The memory of nearly colliding with James's Porsche flitted through Linda's mind. He paused, gazing at the spot. "I remember slamming on the brakes," he said softly, and thinking my life was too carefully controlled for surprises. Yet that one moment upended everything. She looped her arm through his. "In a good way," she teased. He smiled, taking in the unremarkable corner that, for them, had been the start of a remarkable story. A small commemorative plaque had been discreetly installed by the city, designating this corner as part of a community beautification effort tied to Reed Innovations' philanthropic work. Ironically, it now symbolized a place of renewed life. They stood quietly for a minute, lost in thoughts of the past year, Victor's downfall, the new culture at Reed Innovations, Linda's art show, the community loft, and Elizabeth's tentative acceptance. Then James exhaled softly. "You know," he began, "I never believed in fate or love at first sight, but that night, it changed me. You changed me." Linda turned to him, her eyes shimmering. "I always thought falling in love required a soft landing, a safe space. But I was at my lowest, never imagining you, someone so far from my world, would become my safe space." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Her breath caught. Gently, he opened it, revealing a ring. A modest, elegant piece with a single diamond that refracted the dull grey light into a subtle rainbow. "It's not about extravagance," he said quietly, "but about commitment." "Linda Harper, will you marry me?" Tears sprang to her eyes, and she gave a teary laugh. "Yes," she whispered, "1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they shared a tender kiss, the drizzling rain a gentle echo of that first encounter. Passers-by cast curious glances, but for Linda and James, the world had narrowed to this poignant moment of belonging. They spent the rest of the day wandering through the city, hand in hand, culminating in a simple dinner at her loft studio, where they toasted with cheap, sparkling cider. As they tidied up, Linda took a small box from her purse. Inside was a pregnancy test, marked with a clear positive result. She had discovered it the previous evening, unsure how to bring it up. Now, seeing James's unguarded joy, she found her courage. "James," she said softly, pressing the box into his hand. He looked at it, and the color drained from his face before returning as an almost childlike wonder. "You mean—" She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "We're having a baby." He stared at her in awe, then broke into the widest smile she'd ever seen. Pulling her into a fierce embrace, he murmured, "We're really doing this, building a family." Tears of joy shimmered in both their eyes as they held each other. In that quiet loft, echoes of laughter and hope filled the space. A year ago, they were strangers. One a powerful CEO sealed off from emotion, the other a young woman with nowhere to go. Now, as rain lightly tapped on the windows, they stood on the threshold of a whole new beginning, ready to face whatever storms might come together. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.